Hello and welcome to A Moment with Vivacious. Today I'm here with my good friend Dr. Alrisi, the psychologist that's behind this movement. How are you today, Doc?
Pretty good, yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about you? You want to tell a little bit about who you are and your background and what you do?
Okay. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I have had a private practice for over 30 years in Dunwoody, Georgia, and for the past 10 years I've also worked at Georgia Regional Hospital in the skilled unit, and I really like my work. My background, I went to Georgia State in clinical psychology, and then I have a master's from Tufts in child development, and my undergraduate was in child development, and I like developmental issues and how people grow and learn and develop into the best people they can be.
Today, Doc, I want to talk about the mind of America. I know this is going back a little bit because we've talked about this before, but things have so changed. So I want to talk about, because it's like we're almost disconnected.
Yes.
And the foundation of Vivacious Speaks is renewing the consciousness, the evolution of our consciousness. We missed it. So now we need a revolution with our consciousness.
Yeah.
But I think that so many people have become disconnected, like many people. I could be very wrong. I'm not.
From each other.
And from themselves.
And from themselves, yes.
Yeah.
But
So I'm going to talk about what is our consciousness? What makes us conscious of the way we look? You know, like when I was a young woman, we were conscious and we wanted to cover. But we'll get about to that part later. But now, you know, they don't, you know, where's the consciousness? But we first have to understand in order to connect, what is it? If that could be put into words, I don't know. What is our consciousness?
well, consciousness we think of is awareness. To be mindful, to be aware of what we think and what we feel and what we believe. That's how I think of consciousness, being aware, and then being aware of our surroundings and how we impact our surroundings as people. And of course, this changes as we develop in time. Like you take a 5-year-old, and their awareness of how they impact other people is pretty limited. You know, they know if mommy gets upset. They know if they have consequences from their behavior, but they can't figure out how their behavior might be affecting you because they're 5 and they don't have the intellectual ability to do that either. But as we grow, our consciousness should grow. It should grow about who we are, and then it should shift to who we are in the world. We think of adolescence. Eric Erickson talks about the stage in adolescence. It's knowing yourself as an individual versus role confusion. So the task of an individual is to figure out who they are in relation to a lot of the roles they could have. But as we progress, the next step, or as people get older, is, okay, this is who I am and who am I to be in the world.
Is it possible that as an adolescent, we don't grow in the concept of roles, and after we get to be an adult, we don't know our role in each area?
Right. That stage of development is so important, to have some sense of who I am. And there are all these different options of what people can be, and why you would be one way instead of another. And that's why we want to teach adolescents things. We want to expose them to different ideas that would be helpful for them to choose a good direction. Their identity, that sense of self.
So when we're talking about our identity, I want to skip a little bit to the world today.
Okay.
It's almost like individualism is gone. It's almost, to me, I could be wrong, and that's why we call you here. It's almost like our identity is gone. Everybody fluid what's ever going on. Okay, the world is wearing green. Green is good. So if somebody choose red, let's not watch this show. We got to get rid of them. Oh no, because they did. It's individualism in my eyesight. How did we get so far from consciousness is being who we are, knowing who we are and in contact with who we are? How did we get so far from consciousness? Because now I remember, I'm going to give you an example because I don't know if I'm explaining what I'm saying.
Okay.
A man, and I don't even believe he was in this country, he was from this country, but the incident I believe happened in this country. The man said, I don't like ladies wearing those legging pants, those pants. I like ladies in slacks. That very night, thousands of women was on his lawn wearing their exercise clothes. Like he didn't have a right to say that. And recently there was the comedian that made a statement. Oh, you better not say nothing about a certain group of people. And I'm saying certain group of people because I don't want to say it either. You better not say nothing about a certain group of people because they'll ball you out. They'll blackball you. So that certain group of people attempted to blackball him. I appreciated so much that he stood up and said, no, you're not going to do that because I did nothing to your character. I said that what I said is what you're displaying right now. You're trying to destroy me because I said you destroy people who say stuff. That's what I got from it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. How did we come so far from individualism?
Right. Like I like the slacks thing. I mean, can't he like slacks?
Yes.
And other people like exercise. I mean,
yes.
It's so much of what people argue about are preferences. If you prefer slacks over leggings, that's a good, it's the blue-green thing. If you prefer blue over green, green's not better than blue, blue's not better than green, but it's okay to have a favorite color. Don't let the world tell you what your color should be. If you like green, purple, whatever, go for it. And so much of life is a preference. And we fight over preferences like they're good and bad. Now, I do think there's some right and wrongs, don't get me wrong. I do think that some things are kind of like, either right or wrong. But there's so much of life that it's a preference. And then if someone prefers to do one thing or say one thing or like one thing over another, then it doesn't necessarily make them a bad person or wrong. Or certainly they have the right to that. And, I think the slacks things was a good, but I think it polarizes people. And then what happens, also I think what happens is people go online and find people who just like slacks or who think you should be against the person that just likes slacks. Right. And then they get reinforced for these kind of rigid perceptions.
That man's lawn.
So let's go on his lawn,
Yeah. And it just comes to the point where I must say that I have a strong personality, I have a strong voice.
Okay.
So, and I'm adamant about some things.
Things that are important to you.
But I like to have conversations with people who feel differently from me. But people are so sensitive that they think I'm talking about them, or I was talking to a friend. Some people believe in vaccinations and some people don't. So I was saying something about the vaccination, which was on the side of those that didn't get the vaccination or don't want to get the monkeypox vaccine. Well, we don't agree on that, so don't bring that up. I just wanted to have a conversation.
Right.
And it's even, and I could give a really big example of this. because it's destroying us as a nation.
Yes.
Democrat and Republican.
Republicans.
They were made that everybody's voice could be a part of the government.
And
we
but
could
let's
all be
debate
represented.
and let's try to find
Right.
something in
Find
the middle.
that medium that satisfies both sides' opinion. But now we have made enemies. You know, that's a perfect sign of now we've made enemies of the very person who's supposed to be the other half of us.
Yeah, and also we lose valuable information.
Yeah, and we lost that opposite attract. So can we talk about why does that happen? What happened?
Well, there are probably a lot of reasons. I do think the media plays a part because going back to the vaccines, that's a good example. There are things. Let's say you're pro-vaccine, okay, and that's wonderful. Because of all the good that it does. The people that are not, they have some valid information and valid points. But if you go to a place that's pro-vaccine, you're never going to hear that. And if you go to the place that's anti-vax, you're never going to hear the good information.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't get the full picture to make the best decisions often, I think.
And I think,
do you see what I'm saying?
Can I talk about this vaccine thing? Because I work with nurses who we all work the COVID. And I want to tell everybody, you better wear your mask and all. We're not doing that again. A whole bunch of us are going to retire. So I don't know who's going to take care of y'all. You should wear your mask and your vaccine, whatever you're going to get, and at least help us out a little bit. But some nurses, especially nurses that have been in medicine for a long time, they felt like they're not giving us some information about this disease. Mm-hmm. Because we saw so much that did not add up with what you're saying about this disease.
Yeah.
So if you don't know about this disease, we watched this disease affect different parts of your body. It didn't look like anything we had ever seen before. If somebody had cancer, it all looked
changed
alike. But when you walked on the COVID-19, I think it was scary for a lot of medical personnel.
You're saying. Because the symptoms you didn't know.
So how are you going to make a vaccine that works for something else? But I don't want to say too much about it because I don't want to bring any negative feelings toward the community.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I don't want to say too much about it. But they had their reasons on why they refuse. I'm not taking that vaccine. Look at this. Mm-hmm. So when we don't want to talk about the other side, sometimes we build a wall and put people on the other side of the wall on what we're trying to produce.
Exactly.
And I think that goes along with what I'm trying to say about everybody have to be in the same bubble, and it takes away the individualism. Like it takes away our own personal thought process.
Right. Because we have to align with this certain structure or this certain idea.
Yeah.
And then once we align with that idea, then anything that opposes it to us, we don't want to hear about.
Right.
And we're not making good decisions, but I think a lot of times, not all, not making good decisions because of that, because we need the whole picture. I mean, we want to know as much as we can, which may mean looking at the other side and what they have to say, right? And communicate.
I think that would help us live together better. And it would produce more critical thinking because our society has gotten away from thinking. Are you in agreement? Do you see any of what I'm saying?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what I see is in trying to get information, I get frustrated because I hear and I'm like, that's not the whole picture. You're saying this, all right, but what about this? And that critical thinking. We should question a lot of things, but with an open mind. And it's hard because we've become defensive. Have an idea and then you come and defend it rather than saying, this is my idea, maybe let me learn more. Let me see, if you know something I don't know about this, let's share information.
I want to go to thinking. Let's
But that requires some individual strength, like you said, in being open to learning and really wanting to know the whole picture, not just be right.
I want to talk about right, to make it complete.
Right.
And you can still have how you feel about it, both sides, but then we make it complete.
Well, we try to come up with something that can work for the
I want to talk about life and parenting as in addition or in connection to
to
things.
this. Yeah.
I have a young girl that I helped raise her, and she's grown a beautiful life. Beautiful, Latoya's beautiful life. And she was saying, "Well, you can help me raise my kids." I'm paraphrasing. This is not the exact
words. Yeah.
So I said, "Oh, it's not that easy." So she said, "Well," I said, "Y'all don't raise y'all children the way we raised our children." And I'm making a long story short here.
Yeah.
You don't raise your children the way we raised our children, the way we raised y'all. Well, what do you mean? I said, because you had to do what I say. You had to learn what I'm trying to teach you, or I was gonna have to teach you the lesson again. And y'all wait, and y'all have these little babies telling y'all what they're gonna do. Oh, well, they have to say how they feel. And my answer said, oh, they have to say how they feel. So where are they gonna get that wisdom from?
Yeah.
I think that a lot, and if we could speak on this in parenting and, what happens when little children can, me and my mama got into it. I never would have lived to see tomorrow. About getting into it with my parents. I didn't have a mom, but what happened to parenting?
Yeah.
What happened to, like, the child don't get wisdom until after he's taught.
Right.
And I know I'm older, so I could be wrong, but what happened to right and wrong? What happened to consequences?
Yeah. So somewhat in some ways two different things. But the first one is, I do think somewhere in the 70s, mid-70s, late 70s, parents got aware of self-esteem. And they got in touch with how children feel was important. Prior to that, it was them not getting in trouble. You wanted your kids to go to school, make decent grades, not get in trouble with the law. If you had a daughter, you didn't want her to get pregnant. You wanted them to be self-sufficient. You wanted them to, be happy and successful, but mainly parenting was that. And then the idea of self-esteem, healthy self-esteem, feeling good about yourself. Okay. And so parents got into caring about how their children felt, which is really an okay thing too. But it's not an either or. You can care about how your children feel and still go on to teach them the things they need to know. It's not an either or. Do you see what I'm saying? But it got more into, it's just like the idea, there's no first place. We'll give all the kids awards, even though some were better than others. That's a reality. Some ran faster, and why can't we acknowledge and have children learn to deal with disappointment? There's
how they gonna get up when they fall if they don't ever lose?
Right. They're gonna have resilience, learning resilience. There's a paradigm by, I think it was John Gottman. Yeah, it was, and he wrote a book called Raising the Emotionally Intelligent Child. And I really liked some of what he said to do. He says, if you walk in on your children and they're playing, and the 5-year-old is saying, I hate you to his 2-year-old little brother, you want to come in and say, I've told you not to use hate. We don't use that word in our house. You don't hate your brother. You may be mad at him. You need to tell him what he's doing wrong. And so what Gottman says is that you go in and you say to your 5-year-old, oh, I see you're upset. Why are you upset? And then he says, because he knocked down my building. He just comes in here and knocks everything down. And then you say, oh, I know that must be upsetting. So you're talking to him about his feelings. But then you go on and say, but Billy, we've talked about this. You cannot throw things at your brother. You can't say I hate you and throw things at your brother. So you're going to have to, and whatever consequence you give them. So you do the both and.
Right.
You're compassionate to their experience and how they felt, but you go on to correct the behavior and teach them the appropriate way to handle their emotions.
Well, I think.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
but you
I
can,
think
and that's
that.
young. But you can expand that on, with the teenager. Yes, I know you were disappointed that you thought, you were gonna get, get that position or win that race. But and I know that was real disappointing because you've been practicing a lot and you've been doing really good. But she was better. She did,
Yeah.
It happens, and it's okay. But yes, so it's not the coach's fault. It's not that they didn't. She entered the race for whatever reason. She shouldn't have been in the race, whatever. But
Well, let me ask you this: what do you think that this is connected to the gang violence and the violence that goes along with youth?
Wow.
And this is only my opinion. I don't know. I don't know how it all goes, but the lack of wisdom, because now they have a whole lot to say before they even learn how to spell their name. A lot to say about everything, and
Yes.
parents want to be better. They want to give them more. There is no consequences.
Right.
And to be honest, I think a lot of parents are afraid.
Afraid to give their kids consequences. Yeah, they'll get mad
Because
or
they don't want to go to jail. In my community, no, you was gonna get a whipping.
Yeah.
If you was gonna get a strong punishment. They'll wait till time for you to go to the party and then say you're not going anywhere. But sometimes we spend so much time trying not to be like our parents.
Right.
Till this is my
Yes.
opinion.
Yeah.
Me and my mama got into it. I hear that so much. Me and my mama got into it. What? You don't get into it with your mama.
Right. Why did you?
So what place have we come in society where you don't have to respect your parents? You think society owe you something. They have all of that. They could give us some. This was a guy who murdered 2 people who helped him let him work in his house. I said, why? That's all they gave you was 20 years for killing these people? And he said, well, they had it. So, who owes you anything? And I think they call it entitled. So how did we come to this very entitled generation?
It's a really good question. Well, I think there are 2 factors that come to mind for me. One is maybe the overemphasis of feelings. We have our feelings, we have our thoughts, and we have our behaviors. Our feelings are the things we have the least control over. They come and they go. What we're feeling one day, we might be feeling something different the next day. And then our thoughts, we can't stop a negative thought, but we can generate a positive or corrective thought. So if we have a bad thought, we can say, oh, that wouldn't be very nice. I want to correct it. And then we have our behaviors, and we have the most control over our behaviors. And we need to have our behaviors being controlled by our values and beliefs, not our feelings. And what I think has happened is there's been too much permission to do what you feel. And psychology was also proponent of that. I would say in the 70s and 80s, we want to get out our feelings. How do you feel? We want to talk about how you feel. It's so important. Well, we've kind of shifted some now. There's the paradigm of the acceptance and commitment therapy, which says we can't always feel good. sometimes we get disappointed. Sometimes we get angry and we can't act on it because it's not appropriate.
It is almost like, for me,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm just blatant, you know, like I don't and I try to think about it sometimes. I'm in conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Or why would you say that hurt, you know, like everything that hurt my feelings, she hurt my feelings, she hurt my, I mean, you know, like grow up, you know what
So sometimes,
but everywhere, you know, like you have to be conscious of what you're saying. So it's almost like you don't want to talk anymore.
right, because what if you, and not only maybe you offend somebody, but then you, maybe not intentionally, or you're just expressing your thing, but then you get labeled as something. So you're going to be careful because you don't want to get labeled as someone who isn't sensitive to this whatever, even though, or be, you know, labeled as, you know. So I think that, or that happens, and then the dialogue stops, and the sharing stops, and people get into their little camps and get reinforced for how they feel.
And then you can only say what everybody else is saying.
Right. And then you might lose sight of what's important to you. Okay, the paradigm that I like about healthy self-esteem is feeling comfortable with the difference between your ideal self and your real self. So your real self is never as good as your ideal self, and you want to challenge yourself to be better, a better person. There are three kind of ways that people cannot have such good self-esteem. And one is the perfectionist, who no matter if they make 3 A's and 2 B's, they didn't make all A's. Now, it's great to have the goal to make all A's, but you want to appreciate what you've done and not just be miserable if you can't be there. There's the underachiever, who really doesn't know what their ideals are. They just kind of go with the flow. Or they have a very low self-esteem. But then there's what we call the codependent. And the codependent, part of their ideal self becomes to get approval and acceptance and be part of a group, or be accepted or thought well of. So what happens is they quit developing their own ideals and they start accommodating the people around them. And they lose sight of the things that might be important. Or they may not even focus on what they believe. They focus on the acceptance and approval. And that I think is becoming much more prevalent. And so then your self-esteem is to be in this group, you see, rather than to identify the things that you think are important. And yeah, I think these things in this group are important, that I agree with this, but I don't agree with this. And this and this and this. And this is what makes me a unique person. I have a variation of ideals and thoughts that are important to me. And yours will be different, and that's okay. I can respect that.
If we could ever, it's almost like a fantasy, because so often, like in conversation, well, why would you say you make me feel like that? Why you always gotta make me feel like that? You know, like what? Control your feelings. I'm not responsible for your, and I'm not responsible for your feelings. Oh, you're so cold. I get it all the time. Oh, you're so cold. But I don't hold you responsible for mine. But I don't put my feelings out there to be hurt, because all it is your opinion.
Right. Because again, if you have healthy self-esteem and somebody says something that doesn't agree, it says, "Oh, I can't. You're wearing pearls? I don't think those are in." You would think, well, yeah, I'm wearing pearls. I happen to like pearls. And it's okay, because your ideal self likes pearls, and you know your preferences, and you're okay if somebody doesn't agree with it. you see. But if you're a codependent, oh my gosh, I better take this off because they don't appreciate